And we broke this down into kind of considering these 4 pillars of a great website. And the first one's faceted search. So a great search across all platforms, using analytics, having a content strategy in place, and optimizing that search constantly. And then the consistency with branding and UX across platforms. So we're going to talk a little bit about cross platforms. And I should mention also, when you're talking about great websites and search experiences, things like Alexa, Siri, just voice search, which is increasingly picking up steam in the market these days. But then the last two, so fully integrating, you want to have SSO everywhere, but there's things like the website should be able to recognize your behavior. And so say you received a credit or a certification, a fully integrated ecosystem should be able to offer up content or products that are logical for kind of the next step in that user journey. And the last piece is experimentation. So then you're talking about things like Optimizely, with AI, machine learning, personalization, multivariate testing, and wrapping all these things together. So guys, you got anything to add here?
Well, it's a big undertaking for some organizations to think all the way through this. And it's interesting. Like, I think that if you start to compartmentalize it and take steps to improving it based on, getting through this whole cycle, it's those little things like we have these two systems integrated, right? We've got I'll just make an example, like we have our community or our LMS integrated with our AMS. And yet that's not changing how our, member experience is online. And arguably with some of that data that we now have in our AMS, if we were to pass some of that with the login, that may change some of the things based on their activity or based on a certification or a micro credential or something like that, or member status or member type or eligibility for something, giving power. And it's, there are rabbit holes to go down for a lot of them, but if you compartmentalize them, you start moving through this to be, a sophisticated, really put together digital experience and a good website over time. I think that anyway, that's my thought, because I look at this as a small business and I'm like, that's a lot to take on, but we've started to peel them back one at a time, and we've really stepped our game up. And I'm, I put myself in the same seat as the associations, I think.
Joe, when we were prepping for this, you liked the LinkedIn example.
Oh,
So
yeah.
with
Yeah, I think
integration and search.
absolutely. I mean, I think, for a lot of, people who do what we do, LinkedIn is kind of the social media channel of choice. So if you really think about what they've done, they've acquired other companies, they've really expanded features and kind of value that way. But you can search for a job. Obviously, that's one of their core functions. You can search for people in kind of a member directory kind of format. You can also search for companies. You can search for content people are creating. So, people publish posts and articles and things. You can search that. And really interesting to me, you can also search into what used to be lynda.com became LinkedIn Learning, and you can search courses all in that one search box. So that's a, kind of a great example of, here's a great platform. You can reach just about every corner of the application from that single search box.
And what about search utilities? So, finding utilities, maybe is a better way to say it.
Yeah, so this is like a search box trend that I'm seeing increasingly now, which is that because the user expects that search box to be that first answer, that first interaction with your site, I'm seeing a lot more sites put kind of utility functions in the search. So for example, imagine going to your search box on your site and typing in login and having it take you to the login page, or any other functionality like that, like change my address, you might put in the search box. That's what the users are expecting now, is that direct connection for, what I'm looking for sometimes isn't content. It could be, I'm looking for a utility or a tool. And that to me is one of those areas that's like the future of the search box.
Yeah. So just to kind of, move further with this, we talked about this in a past webinar, but like the 4 pillars of a great website, this kind of gets wrapped up into this visual, and I love my visuals. But with all the platforms in the association digital universe, we need to make sure that content from all of them is searchable, and this is the federated search discussion. But also extremely importantly is branding consistently. I think in the association market, we see that is not necessarily a strong suit. So if you've got all these platforms, oftentimes we'll see that many of them look very, very different from the actual brand. And then obviously fully integrating all these platforms, like we had touched on a little bit more. But Joe, you have anything to add on the brand consistency things? I think that's something
Absolutely.
we
It's
see a
it's a
lot.
huge concern. And it's not just the logo, you know, and that often is a starting point, making sure the branding is consistent as far as the look and feel and brand expression, if you will, you know, colors and typography. Frequently across platforms, those are different, which for an end user, for your audience, that's going to equal a fragmented brand. I've even had in our user research and discovery process, I've had members tell us, I didn't even know that platform was part of the organization, right? And it even included the name of the org in the brand, and they still couldn't recognize it as part of the organization. That's a sort of jarring experience to take a look out for. But there's also the consistency of user experience too, and making sure that you're delivering at the level that is expected across the platform. So, you know, one weak link in the chain is all it takes to start to fragment the brand and really diminish the user experience.
And that's what it's all about, right? I mean, putting the user at the center of the universe rather than traditionally like the AMS. Ben, anything to add there?
You know, yeah, I think that people undervalue the importance of the brand consistency, because I feel like putting the AMS at the center in a lot of cases is their way of saying, let's look at it from the member's perspective. We want one single login, right? And they create single sign-on and they write a little bit of data back to the AMS. And I feel like that's the good versus great when we're talking about websites, right? If we were to take a look at like the user experience across some of these things, um, that's the level up, right? You want a good sign-on experience, but I've worked with organizations that, you know, are managed by an AMC that have, you know, a website, but then their AMS pages branded differently, and then also branded differently than their online publication. And worse yet, they've got like separate domains for a lot of them, and yet they've tried to put them all in one navigation and time all together. So, you know, data and integration, and that path and that journey and sharing data is important. But you know, when we're talking less about data and AMS, and let's assume we have some of that worked out, we're talking about websites today, and you have to make sure that, you know, you, as maybe the proprietor of these things, knows what you're looking at. Sometimes, um, it's like walking through your house in the dark, right? Like you can do it. If you have a neighbor over, they don't know where they're going to run into a wall, right? So you want to be really mindful of making sure that that consistency is thought of in both directions.